Two footsteps do not make a path. Ndi Okorafor. Chapter 4. Follow the Blaze. The very first day of the trail, we arrived on top of Springer Mountain and met a young man who was sitting near the edge of the summit and taking in the beautiful scene laid out before him. It was the first of many similar views offered by the trail. Row upon row of mountains extended as far as the eye could see. The bluest traces of mountain peaks rose and eventually disappeared into the blue skies that appeared to swallow them in. Between the mountain ranges were forested valleys, shaded in patterns by the sun's rays passing through clouds above. It was beautiful. Something seemed off with a young man who sat before these wonders. He was pleasant and engaging. He even offered to take my picture by the bronze plaque that marked the southern beginning of the trail. As we talked, he shared that he had planned to stay in shelters throughout the hike. He had no tent, little food, and little of anything else. He had not planned for the journey beyond his desire to hike. We parted company, and as I walked on up the trail, he returned to his spot to admire creation. I never saw him again, and he remains on my mind even now. Planning is an essential part of hiking. Even short hikes demand planning. It seems like the common sense thing to do, but my dad often said, common sense ain't so common. Planning isn't something that we do and stop as we step out onto the trails. We continue to plan, constantly assessing, adjusting, making new plans. It was what I did on active duty in the Army. I was a planner. We created plans to accomplish objectives. But we also had created branch plans in case we ran into problems, and we always ran into problems. We had sequence plans for those rare occasions when our plans worked and we could push on to the next goal. Plans are living things. At least good plans are living things, constantly changing according to the realities of the situation. But the young man who sat on top of Springer Mountain didn't appear to have a plan beyond walking north. It's a dangerous thing to face the realities of the wilderness unprepared. The trail is a master teacher which prepares us to experience her marvelous treasures. However, good students of the trail follow in the steps of those who have successfully gone before us. They've marked the way. We share in their success when we follow their blazes. Blazes are marks and symbols which are usually painted on trees along the path of the trail to identify it. It's somewhat like street signs. Different trails may be identified through different blazes. The Pinhoti Trail through Alabama and Georgia is marked with signs of turkey footprints. The Benton McKay Trail is marked with a white diamond shape. The Appalachian Trail has a white rectangular blazes about the size of a dollar bill, and these blazes reassure hikers that they're on the right path. Remaining on the blaze trail is critical. However, each year, a few hikers get lost by stepping off the path. They may step away to attend to bathroom needs, walk a few hundred feet, become disoriented as the forest doors close behind them and they can't find their way back. It's a frightening and sad reality. There are solutions to prevent these unfortunate situations. Poor planning ignores the potential perils of the trail.
Early in 2020, many hikers were getting off the trails at the advice, even the coercion of trail conservancies and hiking associations due to the coronavirus pandemic. My plans to walk the Camino de Santiago were scrapped due to travel restrictions. Feeling trapped by forces beyond my control, I sought escape. When a friend told me about Burkhead Mountain, it felt like the chance to breathe again. The blaze introduced itself to me on that old mountain. My plan was to hike a circular path around Burkhead. It was a 3-day, 2-night adventure. and just a break from the claustrophobic constraints that were pressing in on me. My wife drove me to the trailhead about an hour from our home. The well-worn trail was easy to see. Although I'd never been there before, my phone had an app called All Trails, which displayed a map of the trail and an arrow indicating where I was on that map. The second morning after packing up all my gear, I started down the trail. The blazes on the trail were similar to the Appalachian Trail blaze. They were white rectangles, about 3 inches wide, 6 inches long, painted on trees alongside the path, similar to the blazes marking the Appalachian Trail. However, I often looked at my phone to reassure myself that I was on the right way. My phone reassured me, especially at trail junctions. Eventually, I came to a junction where the blaze indicated the main trail turned off to the right. However, the All Trails app on my phone directed me to go straight. Trusting technology more than paint, I followed my phone. After about a mile, the path became overgrown. Thinking that it had probably not seen much travel, I continued hiking down the trail, and soon it stopped at an old cemetery. My trusted phone was not so trustworthy. So turning around, I walked back to the junction where the blaze looked as if it was smiling smugly, mocking my mistake. I was introduced to the maxim, follow the blaze and listen to those who have traveled the way before. Learn from their mistakes and don't repeat them. It's an important lesson for hiking new trails as well as our journey through life. These lessons often repeat themselves. They underscore their importance on other trails, especially for those who are slow to learn like me. During a different outing, the trail emphasized the importance of following the blaze. I planned to hike a segment of the North Carolina's Mountain to Sea Trail. That portion of the trail stretched along the Dan River from Hanging Rock to the town of Danbury. Beginning at the parking lot of the Visitor Center, I began to ascend Hanging Rock. There were a series of waterfalls just off the trail. Each waterfall is marked with a little directional sign that includes the name of that particular waterfall. Visiting each one, I was especially intrigued with the hidden falls. The water flowed down the river and disappeared under a pile of large granite rocks. There were gaps and openings among those boulders where I could stand on top and look down to see the water cascading beautifully over the ledge and hear the roar of the falls. It was a really unique and beautiful sight. I stood there for a long time, almost hypnotized by the view. Eventually something shook me from my trance, and I realized that it was time to get back to hiking. Something was wrong as I began to hike. I had followed blazes to get to this point, but now I couldn't find the blaze that should direct me onward. There was a pathway through the growth of weeds, bushes, and trees. In deciding to walk that way, I was sure that a blaze would soon greet me. However, in my haste to push forward, I forgot that the trail was actually behind me. I had walked a side trail to get here, and my mistake would create great challenges, potential dangers, and amazing treasures. Continuing to walk on the unmarked path, I realized this was not part of my plan. This portion of the Mountain to Sea followed the Dan River until it ran out of the park. My new direction was taking me from the river and up a mountainside. It was a clear path, but a wrong one. One of my many weaknesses is that I don't like to go backwards. That personal flaw had contributed to this challenge, and it would continue to aggravate it. I could hear the river flowing below and knew that I was far off the trail that I wanted. I could have and should have retraced my steps back to the correct trail and continued on that way. But no, that would have required me to go back. So in my foolishness, I decided to bushwhack. Bushwhacking requires cutting a new path through the forest, and this was a dense forest with young trees tightly packed together, thickly covered in briars to make things interesting. Walking toward the sound of the water, the challenging path tore at my clothes and skin. I lost my favorite hat that had been given to me by one of my brothers. Still, the roar of the river beckoned me in the right direction to the proper trail. Bushwhacking creates potential dangers. As I walked through the thick brush and my feet disappeared in the undergrowth, briars scratched at my arms and legs, vines grabbed at my body as they attempted to hold me back or trip me up. Progress was slow and difficult. However, the thing that was most unsettling was the absence of a trail. There was no evidence that anyone had ever been this way before. No blazes marked a path, and there was no path to be marked. Pushing my way through the forest growth, I stepped carefully to feel the ground. Hidden rocks or roots added to the hazards. And then I stepped onto some tall grass and briars. As my foot descended toward the ground, it continued downward. I felt no solid ground where I thought there should have been solid ground. Pulling my foot back to safety, I parted the underbrush with my trekking poles and gasped at the view. The reason I hadn't felt solid ground was there was no solid ground. The vegetation had hidden a sharp cliff edge. Had I stepped off that ledge, I would have fallen about 15 feet to the bottom of a gorge. Blazed trails can save hikers from many potential dangers. Whether simple rectangles, diamonds, circles, or elaborate replicas of animal footprints, blazes offer security and reassurance. Blaze-marked trees tell me that others have passed this way. Others who are more experienced and wiser than me marked the path so that I can now share in their experience. What about trails where trees are few, or there are no trees at all? On the Appalachian Trail, sometimes blazes are painted on sidewalks when the trail passes through a town. They may be painted on a bridge or boulders to show the way over rock scrambles. However, when Rick and I hiked through a segment of the Wind River Range in Wyoming, we encountered a very different terrain. Over much of our adventure, there were no trees. On the second day of that outing, we began to ascend the mountains. We ascended elevations more than 11,000 feet. We were far above the tree line, and the rocky terrain was like walking on the moon. The air was thin and cool. The views were clear and spectacular. The experience was spellbinding. The climb had demanded all that I could give, but it was more than worth it. However, we encountered a challenge that I had not considered. There were no blazes. There were no marked paths either. The hard, rocky surface resisted wear, and few hikers visited this area to wear a path anyway. We learned to rely on two tools to find our way. The first tool we discovered in the mountain cairns. Cairns are sort of like a blaze. They provide landmarks to show that someone has been this way before us. Cairns may have different meanings and different purposes. They have a deep history. Cairns are basically rock piles of many different sizes, usually stacked to form some sort of a peak. Among hikers, cairns are used as navigational aids to mark key terrain. Sometimes trailblazers use these rock towers to mark a trail. Sometimes hunters use them to mark hunting areas that have been scouted out for game. The point is that cairns can be misinterpreted, especially by uninitiated hikers who don't know the area. This was my problem. We saw familiar rock piles but didn't know how to interpret their purpose. They were few and far between. The Appalachian Trail is well marked. White blazes mark the path and blue blazes indicate side paths to water sources or other sites of interest. Charlie's Bunyan and the fire tower at Mount Camera are found on blue blazes. Wooden signs are engraved with directions at junctions with other trails and paths down to shelters. The trail is well marked, but we need to know how to read the blazes. There's sort of a code. The color is an easy reminder that there's something different about that trail. Those who have walked these paths before me thought of me and marked the trail. I enjoy the sights, sounds, and experiences of the route that others have created and maintained for me. And when I listen to others who have gone before, follow their blazes. Then I enjoy the fruits of their experience. Perhaps I avoid their mistakes rather than repeating them. Blazes are little things that represent a huge commitment by others, and I reap the reward of their labor. The trail has taught me to appreciate the little things.
Wondering if you'd come wandering my way. If you ever get lost, or if the trail leads you astray, the music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word, and you beat the drum. Round up the troops